Hello and welcome to PMI's Uncommon Sense podcast, tools to improve your work forever. I'm Susanna Clark, Managing Partner with PMI, the performance improvement consulting and training firm. Our Uncommon Sense podcast is a 15-minute conversation with our expert consultants. They talk a lot of common sense, although much of it is not common practice. And that's what this podcast is all about. We want you to be inspired to improve your business through learning more about the tools which can help you succeed and grow. So today I'm joined by Dennis Crommentuijn-Marsh, and we're going to talk about control charts. And today we're going to talk about common fallacies of control charts. So what I'd like to do is, if you can just introduce yourself first, Dennis, for those people who don't know you.
Hi, Sue. So my name is Dennis Crommentuijn-Marsh. I'm a director consultant with PMI and also head of data analytics and insights.
So tell me why common fallacies. What's that all about?
So like any tool that exists, it is about how you use and how you choose to use it, which may give you a benefit. But with every tool that you use, there may also be some dangers, or there may be some common mistakes that you do when using that tool. And the control chart is no different from that. So common fallacies is particularly triggered by the hundreds of projects that I have reviewed, coached, assessed and approved, and the common issues that I see within them. And therefore I want to help our audience by sharing some of the common fallacies, that they may recognize them and therefore either be able to detect them or not fall into the same trap.
Okay. So what's first? What's the first one?
So there's a couple of ones that I see time and time again. And some of them are a bit more geeky than other fallacies. But perhaps the first one is that in a control chart is this thing called a learning phase. And many software tools are out there don't have a learning phase built into it, or an arbitrary learning phase built into it. And therefore what I see in projects which are both green belt or black belt projects, I see that they've done a control chart, which is a control chart where the limits are created on the entire data set, not just the first 24 data points or so. So that's fallacy number one.
And so a learning phase, just for those who aren't familiar, should have the first 20 points, 24?
Yeah, something like that, 20, 24 points. And the question always is, in that learning phase, is it should sensibly reflect the steady state condition of that process.
Okay.
So what you want to do in that learning phase is learn how the process behaves in a steady state condition.
And so steady state being currently?
Yeah.
Okay.
As it runs today, absolutely.
Okay.
And within that, therefore, if we then do a change, and if the change were to be an improvement, it ought to then be different from that steady state condition, and therefore it should pop out as a signal.
Okay, gotcha.
So one client that I worked with, they had a lovely digital live display of control chart data, or in their very high-tech environment. But the data that they used was all the data. So every single time they had extreme points, the control limits got recalculated, and they were just going up and down all the time based on this wildly varying data, because they didn't use a learning phase.
So what we're saying is we get our 20 to 24 points. That's our learning phase. We fix the limits there.
Yep.
And then we're now operating the process with the changes that we've made. And what we're looking for are signals, but without the control limits up and down, because they're fixed. So you would see a signal up, below, within, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Spot on.
Okay. So that's fallacy number one.
Yep.
Create a learning phase, and then fix your limits.
Yes. To then see if the change that you're making as part of the improvement project are actually changes, statistically significant changes.
Okay. Great.
The second fallacy I want to discuss is also a point that we discussed in another podcast around when you and I were working together on one of your control charts, which is where people have made changes, but the changes are not resulting in improvement. So fallacy number 2 is where people at a certain moment in time have made a deliberate change, and then they automatically recalculate the limits after that deliberate change has been made. And as you know, Suze, I measure my weight in the morning, I measure my weight in the evening, there will be a subtle difference. I could then say, of course there was a change because I had lunch and dinner in between. Therefore my weight has gone up. But the question is, has it gone up statistically significant? And very often, just because I've made a change, it doesn't actually lead to statistically significant improvement. And the same is in processes. So the act of making a change is not a trigger in isolation for recalculating the limits. Now, to recalculate the limits, once I've made a change, you have to satisfy 4 rules. Number 1, do we have a signal? Number 2, do we know what caused it? 3, is the change desirable? And 4, is the change sustainable? And only if we comply with all those 4 rules, then we recalculate the control limits after we've made a change. So those 4 rules get broken. And the first one is probably the one that gets broken the most often. People recalculate the control limits even though there wasn't a signal. They say, yeah, I've made a change, therefore there must have been an improvement. And so they break that first rule. The second rule very often gets broken as well. They see a signal, they're not sure what caused it, but they still recalculate. So that's another fallacy. The third one is a bit more complex. Is the change desirable? In the majority of cases, especially on improvement projects, we want to look for a desirable change. But there are some situations, some scenarios where the change is not desirable, yet it's still okay to recalculate. For example, a classic one was a few years ago when we had new financial calculations come in to the finance community and the accounting community, and therefore the lead time by which they were doing something became longer. When you therefore did the control chart on that, the times of doing this particular activity within accounting was going up. It was not a desirable change, but it was actually an unavoidable change because of new regulatory reasons. In that case, it was still very valid and very valuable to still recalculate the limits, because they now want to see in this new process, which actually is a worse process, but it's outside our control, we still want to understand what the variation is within this effectively now worsened process. The last one is about confidence. Is the change sustainable? And that again comes back to your gut feel. It comes back to your confidence in your process and a number of other variables, like how often you calculate your data, how variable is the process in the first place, etc. So for that last one, I use a gut feel rule. And the gut feel rule is really simple, Suze. Imagine your monthly salary. 1/12 of your annual salary. I'm sure that for most people who are listening to this, that's quite a significant amount of money that they probably could not live without. Or if they had to live without it, that would be quite a significant impact on their everyday living. So imagine that 1/12 of your annual salary is what you're going to bet on, is this change sustainable? And if you go, I'm not sure, I'm not prepared to lose a month's wages, then you know what? Keep gathering more data.
Yes, and yeah. I often see us doing that. Maybe that's because we're not a betting community particularly, but yes. We have a theory that an improvement has happened, but we say let's just hang on, and particularly in some cases we're only taking weekly data. Yeah. So each week we're watching that point and seeing whether the next week is another assignable cause, let's say, in the right direction, and at that point, we're often looking for something like 8 or 10 of those before we're confident. Is that the right sort of number, would you say?
Yes. Yeah, it can be. And if it comes to weeks, it comes back to your knowledge of that process, where you determine that, you know what, I know after 8 points in a row above the mean, I could recalculate. But you know what, I'm just going to hang for a few more weeks. If there's no significant impact on process performance or on what you do, just hang fire. Get a bit more confidence. Say, yes, now beyond reasonable doubt, absolutely, there is a change here, let's recalculate now. But indeed, the investigation should start after that 8th point. And that brings me to my next fallacy, Suze.
Okay.
Which is where we have a signal, either, and the two most common rules, by the way, Suze, Western Electric Rule 1 and Western Electric Rule 4. Rule number 1 is 1 point outside the upper or lower control limits. Western Electric Rule 4 means 8 points in a row above the mean or below the mean. And of course, if you talk about the standard Swiss Army knife of charts, the IMR chart, it happens both on the individuals chart and of course also on the moving range chart. So we apply these rules to both charts within the IMR control chart. The fallacy is that we have a signal, but we don't investigate. And in the hundreds of projects that I have coached, monitored, supported and certified, very often I will see a beautiful control chart with signals, but I do not see any annotation on the signals. And of course the classic question then is, what happened there then? And they go, I don't know. Of course you follow up with, what's causing the fact that you are not able to understand what was going on, and say, well, we didn't react appropriately, we didn't respond in the moment. And so, well, why is that? Well, this data was created at the beginning of the month and we only got a report at the end of the month. So at least 28 days have gone past. We have slept since. I don't know what happened anymore. So they lost the opportunity to learn. So that brings me back now to the power of modern data diagnostics. So back to Power BI or Easy SPC or even our control chart package. Plot that data live. And every single time you plot that data live, have a look at that point. Is a signal? Yes, investigate in that moment. And if it's not a signal, you spend literally less than 2 minutes on it. You move on until the next time you plot a data point.
Okay. And is there anything else that you'd like to add in terms of other fallacies?
Yes, and I was just reflecting on this, Suze. There are multiple fallacies that we could spend an awful lot of podcasts on right now. So for example, people have not enough data in the learning phase or too many data. They have the wrong sampling strategy where they are not getting the right data to go to the control chart, or the data they have got is at a really high level where they should have data collected at a far lower level in the process to be truly able to tweak the process parameters and so forth. And Suze, to all the listeners that are out there, I'd be very happy to talk to them about their experiences with data, let alone with control chart data, but just data in general. And then we can talk through that data sets and see if we can spot some common fallacies, and then also how for them specifically to avoid them and improve their understanding of their process performance.
Okay, great. Well, there you are. There's your offer. Get in touch with Dennis if you think you've got any problems with your control charts. So last tips, tricks, things to think about when you're reviewing control charts. What would you say, Dennis?
So number 1, collect the data live, plot the data live, and analyze that data live.
Okay.
Whatever live means to you, make that period between those 3 activities as short as possible. So absolutely, modern technology can help us with that. Number 2, stick to the basic detection rules, Western Electric Rule 1 and 4. Don't go to any of the other crazy rules out there, Nelson's rules for detection, or any of the other rules that are often available in these data analysis packages. Keep to those 2 basic rules. Unless you have a true understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it, then these rules can be of use, but just keep it simple. My final top tip, Suze, and I know you've seen this also on the control charts that we use from PMIs, annotate, annotate, annotate. Let the control chart tell the story, not just by the points on it, but also text. Let it become a living document of how you have been operating your process and what you've done when you found a signal, how you detected it, what you did about it, etc., etc. That becomes a really powerful storytelling device.
Fantastic. And this is, in case you hadn't noticed, we're quite enthusiastic about control charts. We think they're fantastic. So if you don't know much about them and you wonder what on earth we're talking about, please do get in touch. We'd love to tell you more. Thank you very much for your time, Dennis, today.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us. You can find more episodes of our Uncommon Sense Tools to Improve Your Work Forever in our Knowledge Hub on our website, or, of course, your favourite podcast platform. And do subscribe so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode, where you'll find links to more content on this topic, which includes webinar recordings, toolbox guides, blogs, and infographics, and our training page. You can always drop us a line on team@pmi.co.uk and arrange a time to have a call to talk about how these tools can help you in your organisation. We'd really love to hear from you.